The wolf was going to die. Isolde knew it the moment she saw him. A massive creature, black as midnight, collapsed in the snow outside her cottage. His fur was matted with blood, his breathing shallow and laboured. An arrow protruded from his side, and the snow around him had turned crimson. She should leave him. Any sensible person would. Wolves were dangerous, even wounded ones. Especially wounded ones. A cornered animal would lash out at anything that came near, and this wolf was easily twice the size of any she had ever seen. But Isolde had never been particularly sensible. She grabbed her cloak and her medicine bag and pushed out into the storm. The wind bit at her exposed skin, driving ice into her eyes. But she pressed forward until she reached the wolf's side. He didn't move as she approached, didn't growl or snap. His golden eyes, strange, too intelligent for a beast, tracked her with something that might have been desperation. "Easy," she murmured, kneeling in the bloody snow. "I'm going to help you, but you need to stay still. Understand?" The wolf made a low sound in his throat, not a growl, almost like acknowledgement. Isolde examined the wound with practiced efficiency. The arrow had gone deep, but it hadn't hit anything vital, at least nothing she could see. The real danger was blood loss and infection. If she could get him inside, get him warm, get the arrow out and the wound cleaned. "This is mad," she told herself, even as she was already moving. Completely mad. She couldn't carry him. He was far too large, but she could drag him if she was careful. She grabbed handfuls of his thick fur and pulled, inch by agonizing inch, towards the cottage door. The wolf whimpered, but didn't fight her. His golden eyes stayed fixed on her face the entire time, watching her with that unnerving intelligence. It took nearly an hour to get him inside and onto the pile of furs by the hearth. By the time she was done, Isolde was soaked with sweat and melted snow, her muscles screaming in protest. But the wolf was out of the cold. That was what mattered. "All right." She built up the fire until the cottage blazed with warmth, then knelt beside him with her medicine bag. "This is going to hurt." "I'm sorry." She worked quickly, efficiently. Years of living alone had taught her to tend her own wounds, and she had helped birth calves and stitch up hunting dogs. A wolf wasn't so different. She removed the arrow with a single, smooth motion, pressing cloths to the wound to staunch the bleeding, then cleaned it with spirits that made the wolf yelp and snap his jaws, though never at her, never anywhere close to her. "Almost done," she promised, threading a needle with steady hands. "Almost done. You're doing so well." She stitched the wound closed, applied a poultice of herbs she had gathered last autumn, and wrapped the whole thing in clean bandages. By the time she finished, the wolf's breathing had steadied. His eyes had closed. He slept, finally, deeply, his massive body rising and falling with each breath. Isolde sat back on her heels and stared at him. What had she done? She had just dragged a wild wolf into her home and tended his wounds like he was some kind of pet. Her neighbours in the village, if she still had neighbours, if any of them still spoke to her, would think she had lost her mind entirely. But looking at him now, peaceful by the fire, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. He would have died out there. Whatever else happened, she had saved a life tonight. She dragged a blanket from her bed and curled up in the chair by the hearth, keeping watch over her strange patient. The fire crackled. The storm howled outside. And somewhere in the space between waking and sleeping, Isolde could have sworn she heard the wolf whisper something. But that was impossible. Wolves didn't speak. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and an empty pile of furs. Isolde bolted upright, her heart hammering. The wolf was gone. The bandages lay discarded on the floor, spotted with blood, but no longer soaked through. The door was still barred from the inside. The windows were intact. Where had he gone? Looking for someone. The voice came from behind her, low, rough, amused. Isolde spun around so fast she nearly fell out of the chair. A man stood in the corner of her cottage. He was enormous, tall enough that his head nearly brushed the rafters, with shoulders broad enough to fill the doorway. Dark hair fell in waves past his jaw, and his skin was pale, marked with scars she didn't recognize. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Golden. The exact shade of the wolf's. You... She scrambled to her feet, looking wildly around for a weapon. Her skinning knife was on the table. Too far. The poker by the fire was closer. She lunged for it. The man didn't move, didn't try to stop her. He just watched, a faint smile playing at the corner of his mouth as she brandished the poker like a sword. "Who are you?" she demanded. "How did you get in here? Where's the wolf?" So many questions. He pushed off from the wall and took a step toward her. She raised the poker higher, and he stopped, holding up his hands. "Easy. I'm not going to hurt you. That would be poor repayment for the woman who saved my life." Isolde's mind raced. Saved his life. The wolf's golden eyes. The impossible size of the creature. The way he had watched her with intelligence no animal should possess. "You're the wolf," she breathed. "That's impossible. You can't. Wolves don't turn into men." He smiled, and it was sharp, predatory, but not cruel. "No, ordinary wolves don't, but I'm not an ordinary wolf." "What are you?" "Lycan." He said it like it should mean something. When her expression remained blank, his eyebrows rose. "You don't know. You live this close to the border, and you don't know about Lycans?" "I know they exist." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I know they rule the Northern Kingdom. I know they're dangerous." "Dangerous?" He laughed, a low, rumbling sound. "Yes, I suppose we are. To our enemies, at least." He took another step forward, and this time she didn't raise the poker. "But not to you. Never to you. You saved my life, woman. Among my people, that creates a debt that can never be fully repaid." "I don't want repayment. I just want—" She stopped, unsure what she wanted. For this to make sense. For the ground to stop shifting beneath her feet. For the impossibly handsome man in her cottage to stop looking at her like she was something miraculous. "What's your name?" he asked. "Isolde." "Isolde." He said it slowly, savoring the syllables. "I am Kalen, king of the northern Lycans." The poker clattered from her nerveless fingers. King. She had dragged a king through the snow, had stitched up a king's wounds with her own hands, had slept in a chair while a king lay on her floor wrapped in bandages and old furs. "That's not... You can't be..." "I can be. I am." He closed the distance between them, stopping just out of arm's reach. "I was hunting near the border when I was ambushed. Arrows tipped with wolfsbane. I barely made it to your cottage before the poison took hold." His expression softened. "You saved me, Isolde. Without your help, I would have died in that snowdrift." "Anyone would have done the same." "No." His voice hardened. "They wouldn't have. Most humans would have let me die, or worse, finished the job themselves. Lycan pelts fetch a high price in the southern markets." His golden eyes held hers. But you didn't. You dragged me inside, tended my wounds, sat watch over me through the night. Why? Isolde didn't know how to answer. Why had she saved him? Because he was hurt, because she could help, because leaving any creature to die in the cold felt wrong in a way she couldn't articulate. Because it was the right thing to do, she said finally. Something shifted in his expression. The predatory edge softened into something else. Something warmer, something that made her pulse quicken in ways she didn't understand. The right thing to do, he repeated quietly. Do you know how rare that is? How few people in this world do things simply because they're right? I don't need a lecture on human nature from a wolf. He laughed again, genuine this time, surprised. You have fire, Isolde. I like that. Before she could respond, he reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm, his palm rough with calluses. She should have pulled away, should have demanded he release her. She didn't. I owe you a debt, he said, and I intend to repay it. But more than that. He paused, his golden eyes searching her face. Something happened when you touched me last night. Something I haven't felt in 300 years. My wolf recognized you, Isolde. Recognized you as something important. Something precious. Her heart was pounding now, so loud she was certain he could hear it. What does that mean? It means, he said slowly, that I think you might be my mate. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Mate. She had heard stories, whispered tales of Lycans who found their fated partners, bonded for life through a connection that transcended reason or choice. She had always assumed they were fairy tales, myths designed to make monsters seem romantic. But looking into Kaelin's golden eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand around hers, she wasn't so sure anymore. This is impossible, she whispered. Perhaps. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. But impossible things happen every day. A woman saves a dying wolf. A king wakes up in a stranger's cottage. And maybe, just maybe, two people who were never supposed to meet find each other anyway. He released her hand and stepped back, giving her space to breathe, to think. I won't force anything on you, he said. If you want me to leave, I'll leave. I'll ensure you're rewarded for saving my life, and you'll never see me again. But if you're willing, if you're curious, I'd like the chance to explore what this connection might be. Isolde looked at him, the Lycan king, the wolf she had saved from death, the man who stood in her cottage speaking of fate and mates and impossible things. She should tell him to go, should return to her quiet life, her solitary existence, her cottage at the edge of the world where nothing ever changed. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, stay, at least until your wound heals. Then we'll see. Kaelin's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Then we'll see, he agreed. That's all I ask. He stayed for 3 days. 3 days of Isolde's quiet cottage filled with a presence too large to ignore. Kaelin respected her space, slept on the furs by the hearth despite her half-hearted offer of the bed, kept his distance when she seemed to need it, never pushed for more than she was willing to give. But he was always there, always watching her with those golden eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. She learned things about him in those 3 days. That he had ruled the Northern Kingdom for 200 years since his father's death in a border war. That he had never taken a queen, never found a mate, had resigned himself to ruling alone until his dying day. That he could shift between wolf and man at will, though the transformation took energy he didn't have while his wound was still healing. She also learned that he was surprisingly easy to talk to. "Why do you live out here alone?" he asked on the second evening, watching her prepare a stew from the rabbit she had caught that morning. "You're clearly capable, intelligent. You could live anywhere." Isolde kept her eyes on the pot. "I prefer solitude." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." He was quiet for a moment. When she finally glanced at him, he was studying her with an expression she couldn't read. "You're hiding from something," he said. It wasn't a question. Or someone. Her hands stilled on the ladle. "What makes you say that?" "Because I recognize the look. I've seen it in soldiers who've been through too much, in wolves who've lost their packs." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You don't live at the edge of the world because you prefer solitude, Isolde. You live here because you're afraid of what's in the center." She should lie, should deflect, change the subject, tell him to mind his own business. But something in his golden gaze made the truth rise up unbidden. "There was a man," she said quietly, "in the village I grew up in. He was wealthy, powerful. He decided he wanted me, and when I refused him, he—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "He made my life impossible, turned everyone against me, spread lies until no one would speak to me, buy from me, even look at me. I left before he could do worse." "How long ago?" "5 years." "And you've been alone ever since?" "It's safer alone." The words came out sharper than she intended. "No one can hurt you if you don't let anyone close." Kalen was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough, with barely contained fury. "What was his name?" "Why does it matter?" "Because I want to know the name of the man I'm going to destroy." Isolde looked up sharply. The easy warmth had vanished from his expression, replaced by something cold and deadly. His golden eyes gleamed with predatory intent. "You can't just—" "I can." He rose from his seat, pacing the small cottage like a caged animal. "I'm the Lycan king. My reach extends far beyond my own borders. If this man is still alive, still free, still capable of hurting others the way he hurt you, he's not your problem. You're my mate." The words came out like a growl. "Your problems are my problems. Your enemies are my enemies. And anyone who made you so afraid of human contact that you've spent 5 years hiding in the wilderness." He stopped, visibly forcing himself to calm down. "Tell me his name, Isolde. Please." She shouldn't. She had spent 5 years trying to forget that name, trying to bury the memories of what Marcus Thorne had done to her, the way he had systematically dismantled her entire life because she had dared to say no. But looking at Kalen, this ancient king who was shaking with rage on her behalf, she felt something crack open inside her. "Marcus Thorne," she whispered. "His name is Marcus Thorne." Kalen filed the name away, his jaw tight. "When I return to my kingdom, I'll send inquiries. If he's done this to others, and men like him always do, he'll face justice." Justice. The word tasted bitter. "I stopped believing in justice a long time ago." "Then let me show you it still exists." He crossed to her, stopping just out of arm's reach. "Let me prove that not all men are like him. That power doesn't have to mean cruelty." "Why do you care so much?" The question burst out of her. "You barely know me. You've been here 3 days, and you're talking about destroying men on my behalf, about mates and fate and— because my wolf chose you." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I don't fully understand it either. I've spent 3 centuries alone, convinced I would never find what my parents had, what my grandparents had. And then I'm dying in a snowdrift, and a woman drags me inside and saves my life, and suddenly everything makes sense. That doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't. He smiled, a small, rueful thing. But when has love ever made sense? Love. The word hung in the air between them. Isolde's heart hammered against her ribs. You don't love me. You can't. You don't know me. I know you saved a dying wolf without thought of reward. I know you live alone because the world hurt you. But you still chose kindness when you could have chosen self-preservation. I know you're strong and stubborn, and so afraid of being hurt again that you've built walls around yourself 10 feet thick. He took a step closer. And I know that when I look at you, something in me settles. Something that's been restless for 300 years finally feels like it's found home. Isolde's eyes burned. You're talking about forever, about mate bonds and kingdoms, and I'm talking about possibility. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands. Gentle, so gentle. I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I'm not asking you to throw away the walls you've built or trust me completely, or even believe that this is real. I'm just asking you to consider it, to let me prove myself, to give me a chance to show you what we could be. She should pull away, should remind him that she was a human and he was a Lycan, that their worlds were too different, that she was too damaged for fairy tale endings. But his hands were warm on her face. His golden eyes held nothing but sincerity. And for the first time in 5 years, she wanted to believe in something. One chance, she heard herself say. I'll give you one chance. But if you hurt me, I would die first. He said it like a vow. I would tear out my own heart before I caused you pain. She believed him, against all reason, against all the lessons she had learned about men and their promises. She believed him. All right, she whispered. One chance. Kalen leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead, soft, reverent, asking nothing more than she was ready to give. Thank you, he murmured against her skin. You won't regret this. On the third night, his wound finally closed. He could shift again, could return to his kingdom, could resume his life as the Lycan king. But when dawn broke on the 4th morning, he didn't leave. Come with me, he said instead, standing in her doorway with the rising sun behind him. Come to my kingdom. See my world. Let me show you what life could be like if you weren't hiding anymore. Isolde looked at her cottage, the home she had built from nothing, the sanctuary she had created from her pain. 5 years of solitude, 5 years of safety, 5 years of loneliness she had pretended didn't matter. I don't know how to be part of a world, she admitted. I've been alone so long. Then we'll learn together. He held out his hand. I've been alone too, Isolde. 3 centuries of it. But I don't want to be alone anymore. Not when I've found you. She looked at his outstretched hand, scarred, strong, waiting, and she took it. All right, she said. Show me your world. Kalen's smile was brighter than the dawn. He swept her into his arms and kissed her. Really kissed her, for the first time. Not soft, not tentative. Fierce and hungry, and full of 300 years of waiting finally finding its end. Isolde gasped against his mouth and kissed him back, her fingers tangling in his dark hair, her heart racing with something that felt terrifyingly like hope. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were blazing gold. Mine, he growled. You're mine, Isolde. Yours, she whispered back. And for the first time in 5 years, she didn't feel afraid. She felt found. The Northern Kingdom was nothing like she had imagined. Isolde had expected cold stone and colder people, a castle full of wolves who would look at her, a human, an outsider, with suspicion and disdain. Instead, she found warmth, laughter, a world that seemed to glow with firelight and life. The castle itself was built into the side of a mountain, its towers reaching toward the sky like fingers grasping at the clouds. But inside, it was welcoming. Tapestries lined the walls. Fires burned in every hearth. And when Kalen walked through the halls with Isolde on his arm, his people didn't just bow, they smiled. "They're happy to see you," she observed, after the third guard had greeted them with genuine warmth. "They're happy to see you." Kalen squeezed her hand. Word travels fast. They know their king has finally found his mate. "I haven't agreed to anything yet." "No, but you're here. That's enough to give them hope." The rooms he gave her were connected to his own, a suite of chambers with a sitting room between them. The bed was enormous, piled with furs in silver and white. The windows looked out over the mountains, and in the distance, Isolde could see wolves running through the snow, their howls carrying on the wind. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's home." Kalen came to stand beside her at the window. "Or it could be, if you want it." She didn't know how to answer that. Home was a concept she had abandoned 5 years ago, when Marcus Thorne had made her village unlivable. She had stopped believing in the possibility of belonging anywhere. But standing here, in this castle full of warmth and wolves, and a king who looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he had ever whispered, she wanted to believe again. "I need time," she said quietly, "to adjust, to understand what all of this means." "Take all the time you need." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I'm not going anywhere." The days that followed were a revelation. Isolde had expected to feel out of place, a human in a kingdom of Lycans, a hermit suddenly thrust into court life. But Kalen's people welcomed her with open arms. The servants treated her with respect. The nobles, though curious, were never cruel. And the common folk, the merchants and craftsmen and farmers who made up the backbone of the kingdom, seemed genuinely delighted to meet their future queen. "They've been waiting for you," one elderly woman told her, pressing a loaf of fresh bread into her hands at the market. 300 years, that man has been alone. It's about time he found some happiness. Isolde didn't know what to do with that. Didn't know how to process the idea that an entire kingdom had been hoping for her, or someone like her, to appear and change their king's life. She spent her mornings exploring the castle, learning its passages and hidden corners. She spent her afternoons in the library, devouring books on Lycan history and culture, trying to understand the world she had stumbled into. And she spent her evenings with Kalen. They talked for hours, about everything, about nothing. He told her about his parents, who had been fated mates, desperately in love until a border war claimed them both. He told her about the loneliness of ruling alone, the weight of centuries without anyone to share them with. He told her about his fears, that he would never find his mate, that he would rule forever in isolation, that he would die without ever knowing what his parents had known. And she told him things in return, things she had never told anyone. "I wanted children once," she admitted one night, curled up beside him on the furs in front of the fire. "A family, a home. But after Marcus, after everything he did—" She shook her head. "I stopped wanting. It was easier that way. Wanting just led to disappointment." Kalen was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her closer, tucking her against his chest. "You can want again," he said softly. "You can have everything you ever dreamed of. A family, a home, children, all of it. I'll give you all of it if you'll let me." "You don't know that. You can't promise—" "I can." He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I'm the Lycan King. I have more power and wealth than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but none of it means anything without someone to share it with. You, Isolde, I want to share it with you." Her eyes burned. "I don't know if I know how to want anymore. I've spent so long protecting myself." "Then let me protect you instead." He kissed her softly. "Let me be the wall between you and the world. Let me be the one who keeps you safe, so you can finally stop running and just be." She broke then. The tears she had been holding back for 5 years, longer if she was honest, came flooding out in a rush she couldn't control. She cried for the woman she had been before Marcus Thorne destroyed her life, for the years she had spent in hiding, alone and afraid, for every dream she had abandoned because hoping hurt too much, and Kalen held her through all of it. He didn't shush her or tell her to calm down. He simply wrapped his arms around her and let her grieve for everything she had lost. "I'm sorry," she gasped, when the tears finally subsided. "I didn't mean to—" "Don't apologize." He wiped her cheeks with gentle fingers. "You've been carrying that weight for a long time. It's all right to put it down." "I don't know how." "Then I'll teach you." He pressed his forehead to hers. "We have time, Isolde. We have all the time in the world." That night, for the first time since arriving at the castle, Isolde didn't sleep in her own chambers. She stayed with Kalen. Not for anything physical, not yet, but simply to be held. To fall asleep with his arms around her, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, his warmth surrounding her like a shield against every dark thing she had ever feared. She woke in the middle of the night to find him watching her, his golden eyes soft in the moonlight. "What are you doing?" she murmured, still half asleep. "Memorizing you." He traced a finger down her cheek. "I've waited 300 years for this moment. I want to remember every detail." "You're ridiculous." "Probably." He smiled. "But I'm your ridiculous king. If you'll have me." She should think about it, should weigh the pros and cons, consider the implications, make a rational decision. Instead, she kissed him. It started soft, tender, but the spark between them caught and blazed, and suddenly soft wasn't enough. She pulled him closer, arching into him, and he groaned against her mouth, a low, desperate sound that sent heat flooding through her veins. "Are you sure?" he asked, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes. "We don't have to—" "I'm sure." She pulled him back down. "I want this. I want you." He didn't ask again. Later, much later, Isolde lay tangled in the sheets, her head on Kalen's chest, feeling more at peace than she had in years, maybe ever. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her back, and she could feel the satisfied rumble of his wolf beneath his skin. "I love you," she said. The words came out before she could stop them, before she could think about whether she meant them, whether it was too soon, whether she was setting herself up for heartbreak. But when Kalen's arms tightened around her, when his voice came out rough and thick with emotion, she knew it didn't matter. "I love you too," he said. "I've loved you since you dragged a dying wolf through the snow and told him to hold still while you stitched his wounds. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." She smiled against his chest. That's a long time. Not long enough. He kissed the top of her head. Not nearly long enough. Outside, the wolves howled at the moon. Inside, wrapped in the arms of a king who loved her, Isolde finally understood what it meant to come home. The message arrived 2 weeks later. Isolde was in the library when Kaelan found her, a letter clutched in his hand and something dangerous burning in his golden eyes. She set down her book immediately, her heart stuttering at his expression. What is it? Marcus Thorne. He said the name like a curse. My men have been investigating him since I returned. The reports came back this morning. Isolde's blood ran cold. She had tried not to think about Marcus, had tried to bury him in the same dark corner of her mind where she kept all the other painful memories. But hearing his name now, in this place she had started to think of as sanctuary, made all the old fears come rushing back. What did they find? Kaelan crossed to her, crouching down so they were at eye level. His expression was carefully controlled, but she could see the fury simmering beneath the surface. You weren't the only one. His voice was rough. After you left, he moved on to other women, 3 that my men could confirm. All of them refused him. All of them had their lives destroyed. One... He stopped, his jaw clenching. One took her own life rather than endure what he put her through. The room tilted. Isolde gripped the armrest of her chair, trying to anchor herself against the wave of grief and guilt that threatened to pull her under. I should have done something, she whispered. I should have warned people. I should have... No. Kaelan took her hands in his. You did what you had to do to survive. You are not responsible for his actions. He is, and he's going to pay for them. What do you mean? I mean, I've issued a warrant for his arrest. Kaelan's eyes glittered with cold satisfaction. My soldiers are bringing him here to face justice for his crimes, not just against you, against all of them. Isolde stared at him. You can do that? He's not even in your kingdom. He's in a territory that trades with my kingdom. When I informed their lord that Marcus Thorne had harassed my mate and driven multiple women to ruin, he was more than happy to hand him over. A grim smile crossed his face. It's amazing how cooperative people become when the Lycan king expresses his displeasure. She should feel something. Relief, perhaps. Satisfaction. Justice, finally, after 5 years of hiding. But all she felt was numb. I don't know if I can face him, she admitted. I thought I was over it. I thought I had moved on. But just hearing his name... You don't have to face him. Kaelan squeezed her hands. You don't have to do anything. The trial will proceed whether you're there or not. The other women have agreed to testify. The evidence is overwhelming. He will be punished, Isolde. I swear it. But I want to. The words surprised her even as she said them. I want to face him. I want him to see what I've become. I want him to know that he didn't destroy me. Kaelan studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Then you'll face him, and I'll be right beside you. The trial was held 3 days later. Marcus Thorne stood in chains in the great hall, his fine clothes rumpled and his arrogant face pale with fear. He looked smaller than Isolde remembered, less powerful. Just a petty, cruel man who had built his identity on tormenting those weaker than himself. She stood at Kaelan's side, wearing a gown of deep blue silk with a crown of silver on her head. The future queen of the Northern Kingdom, facing down the man who had tried to break her. Isolde, Marcus's voice cracked when he saw her. Please, you have to help me. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them I never meant— Never meant what? She stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. Never meant to destroy my reputation. Never meant to turn everyone I knew against me. Never meant to make my life so unbearable that I had to flee into the wilderness just to survive. I loved you. He lunged against his chains, desperation making him bold. Everything I did because I loved you. That's not love. Isolde's voice was ice. That's obsession. That's control. That's a small, weak man trying to own something he could never deserve. She turned to face the assembled crowd. Nobles and common folk, Lycans and humans, all watching with rapt attention. This man harassed me for refusing his advances, she declared. He spread lies about me, destroyed my livelihood, made my home impossible to live in. And when I finally fled, he did the same thing to other women, 3 others that we know of, one of whom is no longer alive because of his cruelty. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marcus's face had gone grey. I spent 5 years hiding, Isolde continued. 5 years alone, afraid, convinced that I was the problem. That if I had just been smarter, or stronger, or different somehow, none of it would have happened. She turned back to face Marcus. But I wasn't the problem. You were. You are. And today, finally, you're going to face the consequences of what you've done. Kalen stepped forward, his presence commanding instant silence. Marcus Thorne, he announced, his voice ringing through the hall. You have been found guilty of harassment, defamation, and the systematic destruction of multiple lives. In accordance with the laws of this kingdom, I sentence you to 20 years of hard labor in the northern mines. You will never again hold property or position. You will never again have power over anyone. His golden eyes blazed with barely contained fury. And if you ever come near my mate or any of your other victims again, I will tear out your throat myself. Marcus collapsed to his knees, all his arrogance stripped away. He looked pathetic now, small, broken. Isolde felt nothing but relief. They dragged him away, still pleading, still begging. But no one was listening anymore. Justice had been done. Kalen turned to her, his expression softening. How do you feel? She considered the question. 5 years of fear and hiding, and now it was over. The man who had haunted her nightmares was going to spend the next 2 decades in chains, powerless and forgotten. Free, she said finally. I feel free. He pulled her into his arms, right there in front of everyone. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, letting his warmth wash away the last lingering shadows of her past. You were magnificent, he murmured against her hair, standing up there, facing him down. I've never been more proud of anyone in my entire life. I couldn't have done it without you. You could have. He pulled back to meet her eyes. You survived 5 years alone, Isolde. You built a life for yourself out of nothing. You saved a dying wolf without knowing what he was or what he could give you in return. You are the strongest person I've ever known. All I did was give you a stage. She kissed him then, in front of the entire court. Let them see. Let them all see that the woman who had once hidden from the world was hiding no longer. When they finally broke apart, Kalen was smiling. Marry me, he said. Isolde blinked. What? Marry me? He took her hands in his. Be my queen. Be my mate. Be my partner in all things forever. I've waited 300 years for you, Isolde. I don't want to wait anymore. She should think about it. Should consider the implications, the responsibilities, the weight of becoming queen to an entire kingdom. but looking into his golden eyes, eyes that had been watching her from the very first moment, eyes that saw her as she truly was and loved her anyway, there was only one answer she could give. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." The hall erupted in cheers. Kaelin swept her into his arms, spinning her around, laughing with a joy she had never heard from him before. "Mine," he growled when he finally set her down. "Forever and always mine." "Forever and always," she agreed. "Yours." The wedding was held on the first day of spring. Isolde stood before a mirror in the Queen's chambers, watching as attendants fussed with her gown, white silk embroidered with silver wolves, a train that pooled behind her like freshly fallen snow. Her dark hair had been woven with white flowers, and a crown of silver and moonstones rested on her head. She looked like a queen. She felt like one too. "You're stunning." She turned to find Kaelin in the doorway, resplendent in black and silver, his golden eyes blazing with love and pride. He looked at her the way he always did, like she was the most precious thing in the world, like he still couldn't quite believe she was real. "You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony," she said, but she was smiling. "I've never been good at following rules." He crossed the room and took her hands in his. "Especially not when my mate is involved." 2 months had passed since the trial. 2 months of healing, of growing, of learning what it meant to be part of something larger than herself. The fear that had defined her life for so long had finally begun to fade, replaced by something warmer, something that felt like hope. She had found purpose in these months. Working alongside Kaelin, she had helped establish new protocols for handling harassment cases throughout the kingdom. She had met with other women who had survived similar experiences, listening to their stories, offering what comfort she could. She had become an advocate for those who had been silenced, a voice for those too afraid to speak. "You've changed things," Kaelin had told her just last week. "You've made this kingdom better. I just wanted to make sure no one else had to go through what I did." "That's exactly what makes you a great queen." Now, standing in her wedding gown with spring sunlight streaming through the windows, Isolde finally believed him. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I've been ready since the night I dragged a dying wolf through the snow." She squeezed his hands. "I just didn't know it yet." The ceremony was held in the great hall, transformed for the occasion into a wonderland of white flowers and silver ribbons. The entire kingdom had turned out to celebrate. Nobles and common folk, Lycans and humans, all gathered to witness their king finally take a queen. Isolde walked down the aisle on steady legs, her eyes fixed on Kaelin's face. He watched her approach with an expression of such naked adoration that her heart ached with it. 300 years of loneliness, finally ending. 5 years of hiding, finally over. 2 broken souls, finding wholeness in each other. The vows were ancient, spoken in the old tongue of the Lycan people. But when the formal words were done, Kaelin added his own. "I take you as my wife, my mate, my queen," he said, his voice ringing through the hall. "I vow to protect you, to honor you, to stand beside you in all things. But more than that," his voice roughened, "I vow to spend every day reminding you of your worth. You saved my life, Isolde. Not just that night in the snow, but every day since. You taught me what it means to love, to hope, to believe in something beyond duty and obligation. I was existing before you. Now I'm living." Isolde's eyes burned with tears, but she didn't look away. "I take you as my husband, my mate, my king," she replied. "I vow to stand beside you, to support you, to love you with everything I have. 6 months ago, I was hiding in a cottage at the edge of the world, convinced I would spend the rest of my life alone. Then a wounded wolf collapsed in my doorway, and everything changed. She paused, gathering herself. You showed me that I was worth saving too. You showed me that the world still held kindness and love and impossible things. I will spend the rest of my days being grateful for you. The rest of your days, he murmured, and then some. He kissed her, deep, thorough, claiming, and the hall erupted in cheers. The feast that followed was magnificent, but Isolde barely noticed the food or the wine or the endless stream of well-wishers. She was too focused on Kalen, on the warmth of his hand in hers, on the way he looked at her like she was the center of his universe, on the knowledge that this was her life now. This was real. At some point during the celebration, one of the other women who had testified against Marcus Thorne approached her, a young widow named Elise, who had nearly lost everything to his cruelty. I wanted to thank you, Elise said, her eyes bright with tears, for standing up, for speaking out. When I saw you face him down in that courtroom, a queen, after everything he did to you, I finally believed things could get better. Isolde took her hands. They can. They will. And if you ever need anything at all, you come to me. That's not a courtesy. That's a promise. Elise nodded, squeezing her hands, and disappeared back into the crowd. Kalen appeared at her side, sliding an arm around her waist. Making royal decrees already? Just keeping promises. She leaned into him. Isn't that what queens do? Among other things. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Have I told you lately how much I love you? Not in the last 5 minutes. An oversight I intend to correct. He turned her to face him, cupping her face in his hands. I love you, Isolde, more than words can express, more than 300 years of loneliness can measure. You are my heart, my home, my everything. And you're mine. She rose on her tiptoes to kiss him. Forever. Later that night, in the privacy of their chambers, Kalen held her close and whispered promises against her skin. He told her she was beautiful, told her she was brave, told her he would spend every day of his eternal life making sure she knew how cherished she was. Isolde fell asleep in his arms, wrapped in warmth and love, and a happiness she had never dared to imagine. She dreamed of wolves running free beneath a silver moon. 1 year later, Isolde stood on the balcony of the Queen's chambers, watching the sun set over the mountains. Her kingdom now, as much as his. In her arms, a newborn daughter slept peacefully, dark hair like her mother, golden eyes like her father. Kalen came up behind her, wrapping his arms around them both. You're brooding, he said. I'm reflecting. There's a difference. And what are you reflecting on? She leaned back into his warmth, feeling their daughter stir against her chest. I was thinking about the night we met, how close you came to dying in that snowdrift, how different everything would be if I had listened to reason and left you there. But you didn't. No, she smiled. I never was very sensible. Thank the gods for that. He pressed a kiss to her hair. What would you have done, do you think, if you hadn't found me, if you'd spent the rest of your life in that cottage alone? She considered the question. A year ago, she would have said she'd be fine, that she didn't need anyone, that solitude was safety. Now she knew better. I would have survived, she said finally, but I wouldn't have lived, There's a difference. There is. He turned her in his arms, careful not to disturb their sleeping daughter. And now I have everything I never dared to dream of. A home, a family, a purpose. She looked up at him, this ancient king who had stumbled into her life as a wounded wolf and changed everything. You? You saved me, Isolde. His voice was rough with emotion. That first night and every night since. You saved me. We saved each other. He kissed her softly, tenderly, with all the love that 300 years of waiting had built up inside him. Their daughter stirred between them, making a small sound of contentment. Kaelan looked down at her with wonder in his eyes. This tiny creature they had made together, this perfect blend of both their hearts. What should we name her? He asked. Isolde thought about it, about her own mother, long dead, about the life she had built from nothing, the love she had found against all odds, the impossible path that had led her here. Hope, she said finally. I want to name her Hope. Kaelan smiled, that rare, genuine smile that was hers alone. Hope. It's perfect. She looked at her daughter, at her husband, at the kingdom spread out beneath them, painted gold and rose by the setting sun. She had spent 5 years hiding from the world, convinced she would never belong anywhere. Then she had saved a wounded wolf, and the wolf had saved her right back. She was no longer the woman who hid in a cottage at the edge of the world, afraid of her own shadow. She was a queen, a wife, a mother, and she had never been more grateful for senseless acts of kindness, the kind that changed everything, the kind that led wounded wolves to warm hearths and lonely women to impossible love. She was exactly where she was meant to be,